Welcome to Saturday Night at the Movies. I'm your host, Glenn Holland. Tonight's film is the epic western The Big Country, released by United Artists in 1958. William Wyler directed and co-produced the movie with Gregory Peck, who also stars. The other leading actors are Gene Simmons, Charlton Heston, Carol Baker, and Burl Ives, with support from Charles Bickford, Chuck Connors, and Alfonso Bedoya. James McKay, a former sea captain, arrives by stagecoach in a small western town. McKay has had a whirlwind romance with his fiancée, Patricia Terrell, in Baltimore, and is now joining her on her father's vast cattle ranch to prepare for their wedding. When he disembarks from the stage, McKay becomes the object of ridicule from the locals because of his Eastern hat, suit, and manners. He's met by Steve Leach, foreman at the Terrell Ranch, who advises him to conform to local customs to save himself trouble. Leach takes McKay to the home of Julie Maragon, the local schoolmistress, where Patricia is waiting, and gives him a warm welcome. But on their way to her father's ranch, McKay and Patricia are harassed by a group of men from the Hennessy Ranch, owned by Rufus Hennessy, a longtime rival and sworn enemy of Patricia's father, Major Terrell. At the head of the gang is Rufus's eldest son, Buck Hennessy. The men mock McKay and rope him, dragging him back and forth while jeering at him. Patricia is shocked when he doesn't fight back, but McKay makes light of the situation, saying the men were just having fun and that his experience far worse while at sea. McKay's problems as an outsider continue at the Terrell Ranch when Steve Leach and the other hands attempt to goad him into riding a bronco named Old Thunder. McKay refuses. Back at the lavish Terrell mansion, McKay presents the Major with a match set of dueling pistols. When the Major learns about Buck Hennessy's harassment of McKay and Patricia, he leads a group of his men out to Rufus Hennessy's place to take revenge. While they're gone, McKay asks a ranch hand, Ramon, to bring out Old Thunder. After many tries and many painful falls, McKay manages to tame the horse and ride him. But his calm and methodical approach to seemingly impossible problems may not do much good when the Major's attack on the Hennessy Ranch threatens to spark a range war between the two families. William Wyler was born July 1st, 1902, into a Jewish family in Alsace, then a part of Germany. He emigrated to the United States in 1921 after being hired by his mother's cousin Carl Laemmle, the founder of Universal Pictures. After a few years in New York, Wyler moved to Hollywood in 1925 and began directing silent pictures. In 1929, he directed Hell's Heroes, a Western starring Charles Bickford, Universal's first sound picture to be filmed on location. Over the course of a 45-year career, Wyler was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Director a record 12 times, beginning with Dodsworth in 1936. He won the Oscar 3 times, each time for a film that also won Best Picture. The first was Mrs. Miniver in 1942, followed by The Best Years of Our Lives in 1946, and Ben-Hur in 1959. While working for Universal Pictures and later for Paramount, Wyler vainly sought ways to gain creative control over his films. In 1956, he entered a joint production deal with his good friend Gregory Peck to make a film out of Donald Hamilton's Ambush at Blanco Canyon, a serialized story that ran in the Saturday Evening Post in 1957. Wyler's older brother Robert wrote the initial screenplay adaptation with Jessamine West, author of the 1945 novel The Friendly Persuasion, which was adapted for a film under William Wyler's direction in 1956. Other versions of the screenplay were written by Leon Uris, author of 1958's Exodus, adapted into a 1960 movie directed by Otto Preminger, and by Robert Wilder, whose 1942 novel Flamenco Road became a film directed by Michael Curtiz in 1949. The final screenplay for The Big Country was written by James R. Webb, and Cy Bartlett, with all the others receiving screen credit except Eurus, whose version strayed too far from Hamilton's original story. Oddly, Donald Hamilton never published Ambush at Blanco Canyon as a novel, although he did write the paperback novelization of The Big Country that was published by Dell in 1958. In August of the same year, Dell also published a comic book version of the story written by Paul S. Newman and illustrated by Bob Correa. Director William Wyler later said The Big Country was about a man's refusal to act according to accepted standards of behavior. Customs of the Old West were sort of debunked. But what was really being debunked in the film were the well-known tropes and familiar story elements of Westerns, as well as traditional ideas about what a hero in a movie Western should look like and how he should behave. Gregory Peck portrays James McKay as a self-possessed man who acts thoughtfully and deliberately. He's a man who's seen the world and knows how to conduct himself in it. He's willing to assume other people's goodwill unless he has clear evidence to the contrary, yet he is well aware when he's being mocked or provoked. A reviewer for the Monthly Film Bulletin complained at the film's release. The pivotal character of McKay, played on a monotonously self-righteous note by Gregory Peck, never comes alive. But this complaint overlooks McKay's essential personal integrity. From first to last, he remains the same thoughtful, deliberate man. The plot of The Big Country seems to share McKay's broad-minded attitude towards people and conflicts, as well as his insight into human behavior. McKay's infatuation with Patricia Terrell cools when he sees how completely she is entangled in her father's prejudice, greed, and violence. He's drawn instead to the unpretentious and fair-minded Julie Marigon. The Hannesys, the family both the Major and Patricia deride as white trash, are less refined, or less pretentious, than the Terrells. But the patriarch Rufus, at least, has a stronger sense of justice and fair play than Major Terrell. If Rufus is aggrieved by the way the Terrells have treated his family, it's made clear he has good reason to be. Normally in a Western, the audience would expect a man like McKay to finally give in to provocation at the end of the story and commit some violent act of vengeance. But the final shootout between McKay and the brutish Buck Hannessy in The Big Country is a formal duel, complete with twin antique flintlock pistols. When Buck's shot only grazes McKay's forehead, Buck collapses in panic in the face of imminent death, but McKay elopes, spoiling his shot. Buck is instead shot by his father Rufus, outraged by Buck's cowardice and treachery. The traditions of cinematic Westerns may demand that a villain like Buck must meet a violent fate. But in The Big Country, the circumstances of his death allow Rufus to show his commitment to honor and a rough sort of justice, while James McKay retains his principles and his humanity. The way The Big Country both fulfilled and subverted audience expectations for an epic Western didn't sit well with many critics. Bosley Crowther wrote in the New York Times, "For all this film's mighty pretensions, it does not get far beneath the skin of its conventional Western situation and its stock Western characters. It skims across standard complication and ends on a platitude. Peace is a pious precept, but fightin' is more exciting. That's what it proves." Despite mixed reviews, The Big Country was a hit with the public, and with $3.5 million in domestic receipts, it was also the fourth highest-grossing movie of 1958. The critical consensus has shifted in the years since, and many critics would now agree with the assessment of Richard L. Coe in a review in the Washington Post at the film's release. He called The Big Country super stuff. Franz Planer's photography is downright awe-inspiring. The characters are solid, the storyline firm, the plane first-rate, the music more than dashing in this nearly 3-hour tale which should delight everybody. Even those who panned The Big Country when it came out heaped praise on Burl Ives for his portrayal of Rufus Hannessy. Ives was born in Hunt City, Illinois on June 14, 1909, and started his career as a folk singer while an itinerant laborer during the early 30s. After serving in the Army during the Second World War, Ives began a movie career. He appeared in East of Eden in 1955 and in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Desire Under the Elms, and Our Man in Havana, all in 1958, the same year he played Rufus Hannessy in The Big Country. That role earned him his only Oscar nomination and an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. But today, Burl Ives is probably best known as the voice of Sam the Snowman in the 1964 Rankin-Bass stop-action animated Christmas television special, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Please join us again next time for another Saturday Night at the Movies. I'm Glenn Holland. Good night.